TJ and I have made it through the first 5 entire sections of the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline. Has it been a boring journey? No, we've covered all kinds of stuff. We've talked about theology. We've talked about organizational layouts and logistics. It's been a wild ride. Let me tell you, this has been the wildest ride through any book of discipline that's ever been done. Would you not agree with that, TJ?
Yeah, if it's like one of one, I guess it would be the wildest.
If it's what,
If there's nobody else going through the book of discipline.
you think that we would lose out to someone else doing this same work?
I don't know. It depends on who it is.
I think we are about as interesting as this can get. Maybe somebody else. Here's a friendly wager. Someone else do this series and see if you stack up. I very much doubt you will.
See how long you're able to do it. This is a lot.
Yeah, it's been fun, and of course they're going to change a lot of stuff in here at the convening conference. But the whole thought here being we should know what the structure is that we've inherited so that whenever the changes are made, we know why. And
going into it, you should have a basic idea of what it says. So, I mean, if you want to make changes, you need to know what it says first.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I don't know, I should have looked it up before we began filming. There is a deadline coming up for suggesting changes to the transitional, but it's not going to be the transitional book. It's just going to be the Book of Doctrines and Discipline here in September is when we're getting together after that. So anyway, we're working with the most recent updated version. Of course, we always put a link to where you can find it for yourself online. We're going to show you where it is that we're reading through. We're going to talk through why it matters. Before that, I haven't even greeted TJ. TJ, good morning. How are you?
Morning. It's I'm all right. I'm all right.
Good.
Better than last week.
Yes, you were very sick last week. Yes.
I was very sick.
TJ has been growing in virtue. I have not, but he's been growing in virtue. We've got a new young man working with us in the office. We're trying to teach him the tricks of the trade, and TJ is surprisingly patient.
Well, that's generous. It's only been 2 days.
3
days.
You're doing all right. I'm happy with TJ, and I'm happy with the young man who's joined us. So anyway, we need to get into it. We're at part 6, conferences. Paragraph 601, this is on page 74. TJ, is there anything that we need to say before we get into this?
I don't think so. This is going to be, I feel like this will be pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Well, neither one of us.
We didn't look at it.
Neither one of us have looked at it. I've been preparing for this other series I've been doing, so I think we will both be surprised.
Yeah.
Why don't you do the first paragraph?
Okay. 601, the conference system. Beginning in 1744, when John Wesley first met with his brother Charles and a few other clergymen to consider how we should proceed to save our souls, our own souls, and those that hurt us, the principal expression of connectionalism within Methodism has historically been within its conference system. The agenda for the first conference was a simple one. 1, what to teach. 2, how to teach. And 3, what to do, that is, how to regulate our doctrine, discipline, and practice. And the agenda for that and subsequent meetings was generally expressed in a question and answer format. Organized at multiple levels, charge conferences, district conferences, annual conferences, regional conferences, and a general conference, the conference system is at the spiritual center of Methodism and refers not simply to a meeting and the decisions that may be made in such a setting, but both to the act of gathering together in holy conferencing and to the persons themselves who do so. The conference system provides for collective discernment and collective decision-making as the governing principle of our church polity, which is coming from Proverbs 15:22 and Acts 15:1 through 35.
So I looked up Proverbs 15:22. It says, "Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established." And then Acts 15, let's see, that was verse
1 through 35.
Oh, that's pretty long.
Yeah, that's a lot.
"Certain men came down from Judea, taught the brethren, and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. When therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and elders about this question. So that would be about the Jerusalem council and how they counseled together in order to come up with the final agreement that no, they need not be circumcised again, but don't eat meat with blood in it, meat of animals that have been strangled, don't do sexual immorality. Those were the bare minimum requirements put on new believers. So these are proof texts for the proper governance structure of the church being holy conferencing. So there's a term in Methodism. People don't know it. You know how there are like certain words that have a general meaning, but then in a certain community they have like a much greater meaning.
Give me an example.
What would an example be? An example would be, okay, so like in politics, this happens all the time. Gender affirming care. When you listen to those words, yeah, I go into the doctor. Good. He says I'm a man. Thank you for affirming me, or I don't know. But actually, it's when someone comes in not identifying as the sex that they are. Gender affirming is, I'm glad to give you.
How do we mutilate your body to make it the way that you want it?
Who knew we were going to talk about trans stuff today? So, but anyway, it's the words themselves don't convey all the different things that are meant by it. Rather, it's special terminology, and that's what conferencing is. Holy conferencing is a Wesleyan virtue. It's named by John Wesley as a spiritual discipline that we need to attend upon regularly. The basic meaning of conference is just talking to each other. So yeah, let's talk to each other. But
it has a deeper meaning in Methodism, is what you're
absolutely.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm getting to. So the way that Methodists conference, the basic unit of conferencing, you won't be surprised to hear me say this, is the class meeting. So once upon a time, to be a Methodist,
you're adding something to it that's not in here.
So what happened is over time, Methodists built a structure using the same old words that were once upon a time tied to things that we got rid of the things they were tied to. So we just call it a general conference or an annual conference, not knowing that once upon a time, these things were general expressions of a specific practice that every single Methodist was doing, the class meeting. So every single Methodist, it was an optional voluntary group, remember? Sure. And so to belong to a Methodist society, you had to be actively involved in a class. If you were not involved in a class, you could not be a Methodist. And so what they practiced in the class meeting was Wesleyan holy conferencing, which is mutually vulnerable, confessing one's sins, working out one's salvation with fear and trembling. And so because people did that on this basic level, the ones who grew in holiness and earned that trust of their society were sent up to larger conferences where they would continue to participate in that same level of communication. But over time, we stopped with the class meetings, and so we forgot how to talk on that level. And so in annual general conferences, the kind of conversation that's taken place for 150 years has been what we see on Capitol Hill in worldly settings.
Okay.
It's just to show, I went into all that because it's actually like a really meaningful concept that we share our covenant and our shared life together. Well, and it had I love that it talks about this theology here. The purpose is, what should we teach? So we should be talking about doctrine. How to teach, so methods as well. And then what to do, that is how to regulate our doctrine, discipline, and practice. So that's what I understand to be just the connecting tissue. But it's not supposed to be primarily legislative efforts. It's supposed to be, what's the doctrine we've always preached? Let's make sure everybody's preaching the shared doctrine. Who's doing it best? How does it work? What can we all share in together in this setting of like accountability and vulnerability? That's what it's supposed to be. That's what it was intended to be. It hasn't been that way for a long time.
Yeah, you've been more into a general. Well, have you been to a general conference?
I've never been to a general conference, no.
Okay.
But I've seen it on TV.
Okay. But you've been to annual conferences.
Yeah.
District conferences, charge conferences, obviously.
And what takes place there is a very far cry from holy conferencing. So, but the word conference, general conference, annual conference, comes from this spiritual discipline of mutually vulnerable and accountable holy speech.
Yeah, I guess when you think of class meeting, you're saying that all of these should be a bigger version of that, essentially.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And they're not at all.
No. I mean, we focus on just like, what's the words of our covenant? Not even necessarily being concerned for, do we all know the covenant? Do we all submit to the covenant? How are we submitting to the covenant? When you look at the original disciplines that we came up with, they were like that thin. They were like 70 pages, the first ones. And then if you look at...
I mean, we're already 74 pages into this one.
And this one, this was bigger. No, this is huge, but it is smaller actually than the one that came before it. So,
Right.
But yeah, these books of discipline that we've created, they spell out so many details that the original disciplines did not. So it's interesting to look at the shift. I guess for viewers who spent this time belaboring this with me, the exhortation would be in our annual conferences. And here's another thing I notice about annual conferences. Most of them are spent just looking up at a stage and raising our hands at whatever's going on at the stage.
Well, they're feel-good, basically mini revival things.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But even when you look at early American revivals, people were still interacting with each other. It wasn't everybody just looking up at a stage, but it was singing together, interacting together, marching together.
Those evil contemporary bands.
Yes, I do tap into that regular. Yeah, I don't get tired of drawing from that well, do I? But I'm just saying, annual conference is supposed to be primarily a social thing, an interpersonal thing, where we're all interacting together, learning from one another, deliberating together how it is we're going to work together. And when you have Robert's Rules of Order, where only one person can talk, and you have this worship that's all-encompassing and nobody can interact together, then it really limits the conferencing that you can do.
Yeah, I guess so. But whenever you get something as big as the general conference, like how do you do that? How do you make it more personal?
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get to a section where we can think about that. But I just think that's a good question to raise. So thank you for doing that. Let's go on to section 1. It has a paragraph 602 that was intentionally omitted, it says. I can't explain that. That's interesting. But then it goes on to paragraph 603, Book of Doctrines and Disciplines. So I'll read through that. Point 1, translation. All actions of the convening General Conference, including the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Disciplines, shall be translated at general church expense into the official languages of any part of the Global Methodist Church. This material shall also be available in digital form. I wish it said free, for free in digital form. So the United Methodist Book of Discipline, they have a PDF of it, but you have to pay money for it. So,
for the PDF?
Yeah. Yeah.
What about this? Oh, for the United Methodist.
United Methodist one, yeah.
You can't even get the digital?
The digital costs money.
That's
weird. So anyway, I don't feel strongly enough about that one to submit a petition.
The GMC is obviously free online.
Right now. But after the convening conference, hypothetically, they could.
I guess it's one thing if it's a physical copy, because somebody's got to pay for the paper.
Sure. Well, the translation is happening at general expense. So some stuff is being gratis, but we'll see if the PDF is gratis.
Digital form, that seems like it should be free.
Point 2, adaptability. All provisions of the Book of Doctrines and Disciplines shall be generally applicable to all geographic, national, and cultural parts of the church. The adaptability of any provisions shall be written into the provisions themselves in order to be recognized as valid.
Should be adaptable to cultural parts of the church.
So, yeah, it's a global church. We're going to have all different nations and tribes represented. There are going to be some ways in which it's acceptable to behave differently as Global Methodists, depending on the region that we're in.
Right, but it still means the same thing no matter where you're at. I guess that's my, just because you're over somewhere else doesn't mean it automatically means something else. That's what is going off in my head.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It should not be adaptable in that sense.
Yeah, in what way is it adaptable?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
The adaptability of any provisions shall be written into the provisions themselves in order to be recognized as valid.
If it's a global church and we believe all the same thing, why does it have to be adaptable?
Yeah, that's weird.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure
there's
pretty
a
much,
reason for that.
I wonder, in my head, if we don't make it true for the whole church, then just don't put it in there.
Right, yeah.
But
why would it... Yeah, why would it be different? It's kind of like the Christmas covenant thing they're trying to do. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, the
Like,
regionalization plan for the
Africa's
United
got
Methodist
different
Church.
beliefs over here, so they can kind of adapt it to the way they want it. I don't know. Sorry.
Well, and I think we would both be of the mind, well, yeah, it can look different in different places. They don't have to speak English in Nigeria,
Sure, yeah.
you know. So there's obviously ways in which it's okay to be different, but the Book of Discipline, Doctrines and Discipline, should just be, what do we all have in common? What is mandatory across what defines the covenant? If all of a sudden we're doing things different in different parts, that's fine. Just don't put it in here.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's something that you have to have in writing for legal purposes or something.
I don't know. Who knows? If you know, tell us. Let us know. That would be a good. I want to know like what a good example of why how it can be adaptable, other than blatantly it's a different language. Sure.
PlainSpokenPod@gmail.com. Send us. We want to know. All right. Paragraph 604. Powers. You want to take this, TJ?
Yeah. 604. The convening General Conference shall have full legislative power over all matters that are distinctly connectional, including, but not limited to, 1. Adopt a constitution for the Global Methodist Church. 2. Ensure the mission of the church is kept foremost by all of the ministries, agencies, clergy, laity, and officers of the Global Methodist Church. In doing so, the convening General Conference shall remember that disciples of Jesus are made at the level of the local church. The convening General Conference shall endeavor to keep as many resources at the local church level as possible so that the mission of the Global Methodist Church can be achieved. Anything to say on that one?
I'm sure I do.
Okay.
But yeah, go on.
There's a whole lot of them. I didn't know if we were going to stop on each one of these.
You can, if you have something to say, go ahead and camp
out. I like that you're keeping it at the local level. That makes sense to me.
Right, yeah.
Ensure that the mission of the church is kept foremost by all the ministries, agencies. That one jumped out at me, agencies, because obviously in the United Methodist Church, that's not the case. You've got agencies that are very completely on a different page than at the local church level. So the Global Methodist is saying, now we're not going to have that, which I think that's good.
100% agree.
Okay, number 3, define the qualifications, duties, and responsibilities of those who serve as deacons, elders, supply pastors, and other leaders within the Global Methodist Church. Okay, so that's just saying that the convening General Conference can say, you're an elder, this is what an elder means. You're a deacon, this is what a deacon means. Fine. Okay. 4, establish the qualifications, duties, and responsibilities of church membership, which shall be open to all who believe, irrespective of race, color, ethnicity, or tribal identity, gender, or disability. Okay, fine. Not a problem with that. 5, define the qualifications, duties, and responsibilities of the episcopacy and provide for their selection, continuance, and discontinuance. All bishops shall be accountable to the general church through the provisions of Part 8, the judicial administration of this transitional book of Doctrines and Discipline.
So I'm sure you notice it tracks with the content of the transitional book of Doctrines and Discipline as we've read through it. Talked about the role of elders and deacons and bishops.
Right.
It's all these things it's saying you have to have, we've already encountered.
Right. Yeah, it's saying this. The General Conference is in charge of making sure all of these things are the way they are, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
6, determine the powers of regional, annual, district, and church/charge conferences and other connectional associations within the Global Methodist Church, providing as appropriate for each such body to adapt structures that may best maximize their mission. Okay. 7, determine the boundaries of regional conferences, and where there are no regional conferences, to determine the boundaries of annual conferences. Do we have regional conferences right now? I feel like we went over this. There's just provisional annual conferences right now.
Well, and there's districts. We were talking about this last week.
Yeah, if there's not a...
But this was regional conferences?
It says regional conference. You think that's just a holdover from the UMC? Because the regional conferences in the UMC are like Northwestern, whatever. I don't remember.
That's jurisdictions. They had jurisdictional conference. Then they also
Okay,
had
there's a
central
difference.
conferences. I don't remember, are regional conferences even defined?
I don't know. I guess I was just associating them with what we just talked, jurisdictional conferences, which is obviously two completely different things. I don't think it's. Are you looking it up right now?
I was trying to, and then it didn't work. What page are we on?
We're on 75. Yeah, 75.
All right. Yeah. No, I was trying to look up, are there other places where regional conferences are mentioned? And I didn't find anything. So I'm kind of sheepish. I don't know what to make of that.
Let's say regional conferences. Is that what I'm looking for?
Yeah. Yeah. This is on point 6.
I think we're on 7.
Man, I'm out of it.
Yeah, determine the boundaries of regional conferences. 7.
Yeah. Where there are no regional conferences. That's weird, dude. While you're looking it up, I'll read on a little bit. Point 8, establish and give oversight to such general boards, program agencies, or commissions, and to form ministry partnerships as shall be deemed necessary for strengthening and promoting the mission of the Global Methodist Church through the local church. They were smart in how they set this up because they do say, hey, we've got to have general oversight boards and agencies, but local church always comes first. They were smart to focus on the local church right up front and say everything is for the local church.
Yeah.
But then to say we are going to have some other structures, but they are to be in service to the local church. Did you find anything yet?
Okay, yeah, it does define it in 609, so we're going to get there. It hasn't done it yet.
Oh, good. Okay.
So, yeah, it's got a whole section on regional conferences. Section 2 is regional conferences.
Okay. I was embarrassed that I didn't know, but it's because we haven't read over it yet.
Yeah, that's kind of how some of this has already been. Like, they'll mention it before even getting to it.
Well, and if you're telling people how a web is supposed to look, there's no way to only introduce sections of the web. Everything is interconnected, you know?
Yeah, I guess. Okay, you went over 8, is that right?
I did, yes, so go ahead.
9, determine a program for raising and distributing the funds that are necessary for the work of the church. Okay, that makes sense. No, general conference is in charge of determining how to raise money. Number 10, fix the ratio of representation to the general and any regional conferences based upon the number of professing members in each annual conference and region and other factors determined by the general conference. So it's just saying the general conference can determine this, how many people are going to be in an annual conference or regional conference or whatever.
General conference. So how many representatives does each annual conference get to general conference?
Oh, okay.
How do they calculate that?
Not just like, here's an annual conference. It can have this many members. When it hits this many members, we're splitting it into 2 or something.
No, that would be great if they did have that, because then it would keep some conferences from getting so big that they dominate others. But I don't know. I don't think they have anything like that in here.
Yeah.
No, this is how are delegates apportioned? How do you practice representation? Is it the U.S. Senate model where every state, no matter how big they are, gets 2 senators, or is it the U.S. House model where you get more reps based on your population?
And do you know how they're determining that in the GMC?
So right now, we haven't had a convening conference to determine that. So
okay,
I just heard my president pro tempore yesterday talk about this. It's going to be 1/3 based on, it's 1/3 something and then 2/3 something else. It was like number of churches versus number of elders.
Okay.
Full-time elders, and then they average. They add it all in together.
So that's just the what they're doing to begin with, and then they'll figure it out at the convening conference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
It was supposed to be membership, but we don't have accurate membership records for hardly any of the churches. So they had to TLC, Transitional Leadership Committee, the main body at the top. They had to call an audible because you got to figure out some way to apportion delegates. So that's it.
That's fair. 11. Approve and revise music resources and worship rituals of the Global Methodist Church, providing for variations as shall be most helpful to particular contexts worldwide, including making such resources available digitally. So they get to choose. This is our hymn book. Is that what it's saying? Is that what you're?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I guess is fine. Whatever. I mean, I doubt they're going to say, "Oh, you've got that handbook. You can't use that."
That used to be what the Methodist Episcopal Church did.
Really?
Yeah, when in the days of the Sunday school movement, you had official doctrinal curricula that you could not use anything but that, and then there was also an expectation that you wouldn't use any rituals or music that was not in the official hymnal.
You know what? I'm fine with that. That sounds great. Limit it. You can't use this. You got a weird hymn in here that talks about global warming or something. So that's one of the, we didn't go over any of those videos, but they've got weird hymns that are not like biblical at all and not even pertaining to God at all. And they're just singing them because they're some kind of political thing. And I think that's, get rid of it.
And then the people on the other side of that would say, great, we can keep Hillsong out of our churches.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna. I like contemporary music, so some of Hillsong is good. It's case by case basis. Some of their music is trash, but there are some decent hymns. They've got a lot of writers.
If you're okay with this provision here, then you might not be able to get to sing your Hillsong.
I mean, if they say I can't sing Hillsong, then I signed up for this group.
Look at you practicing self-denial.
Yeah.
How virtuous. All right.
Anyways, 12. Provide a judicial system mandating uniform processes and procedures and protecting the rights of all those within the Global Methodist Church. Okay, so it says the General Conference can create a judicial council or whatever, right?
Well, and that its purpose is to defend people.
Okay.
Protect, yeah.
Fine. 13. Act upon petitions received dealing with the church organization and polity, and resolutions dealing with non-disciplinary matters. Okay. You get a petition, they get to deal with it.
Yeah, this is continuing forward. So you saw in the beginning the history is, what are we teaching? How are we teaching it? Let's provide some tissue connecting it. Now it's getting into, well, we can change some stuff, and we can even entertain stuff that doesn't even have to do with the Book of Discipline. So I think it's keeping the door open to all kinds of resolutions and social positions, and hopefully not, but maybe.
Yeah. 14. Adopt or revise a statement of our social witness, provided that such adoption or revision shall require a 3/4 vote of the convening General Conference.
So my brother and I went over the social witness as it stands. It's a 2-page document, which...
Right at the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah. In order to become a Global Methodist Church, you have to sign on with our fundamental doctrines and our social witness. And so Chap Temple was one of the key authors of that. I'm about to reach out to him to see if he'll do an interview with me, because we just covered the revised social principles of the United Methodist Church in the Considering Charlotte series that I'm doing. And he was an author of that as well. So he authored the social positions of 2 denominations. He wasn't the only one, but he was one of 13 voices in the UMC. And I think it was him and maybe 2 or 3 others that crafted it for the GMC. But they're going to augment and tweak it at the convening conference and from then on as well.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
15. To effectively speak on behalf of the whole church, resolutions dealing with social concerns shall similarly require the support of 3/4 of the convening General Conference. All resolutions not part of our social witness or church law shall remain in effect only until the next General Conference convenes, when they may or may not be revised or reapproved.
The way I'm reading this, it's turning into, here's how we feel about every social issue, and we're going to vote on it.
It's kind of what it sounds like, yeah. But I mean, unless we get rid of the social witness thing, that's kind of baked into the cake, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily like it, but
within the United Methodist Church, they just say this isn't church law, so you don't have to believe this stuff. You can still remain a United Methodist, in which case I'm going, okay, well, what's the point then?
Yeah.
If you're going to put it in writing, make it binding and compulsory for everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my fear is that this turns into a majority rule. Here's how most of us feel about the environment. Here's how most of us feel about gender affirming care. Here's how most of us feel about the latest thing, and I don't want it to turn into that.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens.
Right? Okay.
16. In the absence of a regional conference, provide for the oversight and or governance of institutions related to the church, such as hospitals, schools, and other such entities. I think that one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
17, to enact other legislation it determines would be helpful to the mission of the Global Methodist Church. And that's just kind of catch-all, like, well,
and
here's
all
the
other
things.
duties
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
needed. Yeah.
Which, okay, sure.
Okay. Anything else to say?
I don't think so.
Paragraph 605, officers of the convening general conference. Point 1, the bishops shall be the presiding officers at the general conference. Point 2, the convening general conference shall elect a secretary upon nomination by the Transitional Leadership Council. The secretary shall oversee the publication and translation of proposals made to the convening general conference and the actions taken by it, including publishing a transcript of the daily proceedings. The secretary shall be responsible for the corrected copy of the permanent record of the convening general conference. The Transitional Leadership Council shall appoint an interim secretary of the convening general conference who will serve until his or her successor is elected. So when it says that bishops preside, traditionally in the Methodist tradition, they don't vote, but they have voice and they determine who's speaking.
Right.
And so that is ostensibly being carried forward. The thing that became quite frustrating in the United Methodist Church was that they followed Robert's Rules of Order for parliamentary procedure, and bishops are not parliamentarians, nor are they elected to be.
Oh, yeah. That's, I mean, just in our annual conference, the couple that two that I've been to, you can tell, like, that's not, they're not first and foremost, like, schooled in that at all. Like, there was parts of the times where you not even hours, just like other ones we were watching, they had no idea what they were doing. They were just like skipping over rules and
Well, do you remember going through the Eastern Pennsylvania annual conference in that 3-part series?
What's his name?
John Scholl.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, so the role of a bishop is very different from the role of a parliamentarian.
Yeah,
and so what Scholl did was he would just jump back and forth between the two, which was terrible. I mean, it was nobody wants that. Yeah. So man, it'd be really nice to have a provision where you decide on a secretary. Sure, you also decide on a parliamentarian.
Yeah,
and then the bishop can still preside and decide who's speaking, but it's all overseen.
The parliamentarian can be like, "No, I'm running this. You're not doing that right.
Yeah,
that's against the rules."
Yeah,
they're like, know this like the back of their hand.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. I'm going to have you start a list of all the changes we want to make.
Well, in paragraph 6, we're already, section 6, we're already.
I'm kind of serious. Would you start that? Could you start that right now? Okay. Now that we're more than half the way through.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But we can just go, I'll go through again. At least I've read most of this already. So, and then whenever it comes to the secretary, is the secretary, so I like that it's the TLC deciding who there will be. I mean, of course, that can go wrong, but so within the United Methodist Church, they have something called the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate. Gary Graves is the general secretary of the General Conference. I think that's what he's called, and he's the one who compiles all of the legislation, puts it together, sends it out to all the delegates.
This is the job of the secretary.
I think so.
Okay.
I could be confused on this, but you have to have somebody do this.
Sure.
You have to have somebody compile it all, and then
somebody that's not a parliamentarian or the bishop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then as General Conference continues, they have to write up what's happened so that all the delegates can be on the same page, and that's what the secretary will do, and it needs to happen. There's not it doesn't indicate to me that there is an election that takes place. Rather, the TLC just decides who they will be. The secretary, the convening general conference shall elect a secretary upon nomination by the TLC. So they do the nomination, and then it sounds to me like a rubber stamping of the general conference. But I guess hypothetically, according to this, they could say, no, we don't like the TLC's pick. We pick somebody else.
Maybe.
It's a
wasn't
really
paying close attention
influential
to the last part of
position.
the paragraph.
But that will be indicative of like a real intractable thing, a distrust between the TLC and the people if they put forward somebody in the General Assembly's like, no, we want it to be TJ. So
As secretary, yeah.
yeah,
It's,
he is not training for that position. He is not a
no,
viable option, guys.
passing that on to somebody else.
All right, anything else on this before we move on?
I don't think so. That one was pretty short.
Yeah. All right, paragraph 606. Take it away.
Number 1, rules. Well, I guess this is organization. Number
Yeah.
1, rules. The convening general conference shall operate under Robert's Rules of Order and such supplement rules as are adopted by the convening general conference. Okay, so we're going by Robert's Rules of Order.
It's happening. Yep.
Makes sense. 2, a quorum. When the convening general conference is in session, it shall require the presence of a majority of the whole number of delegates to the convening general conference to constitute a quorum for the transactions of business. But a smaller number may take a recess or adjourn from day to day in order to secure a quorum. At the final session may approve the journal, order the records of the roll call, and adjourn sine die. I don't know what that's Latin or something.
Yeah, that would be Latin, but I don't know what it means.
Oh, yeah, I've never heard that.
Sin die?
Something like that.
Die would be day, right? But I don't know.
I didn't take Latin. I took Spanish.
I'm going to see if it lets me look up sine die.
So that's just, okay. So
it is an adverb with reference to business or proceedings that have been adjourned with no appointed date for resumption. So it just means they'll be done after that, I think.
Okay. So it just says for 2, it just says what constitutes a quorum, and it just says a majority. So are we talking like
50% plus 1? I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because it doesn't really specify.
I think I'm noticing that there is no. You have to notify everybody by a certain time or date.
Yeah. I guess it doesn't.
Everybody has to have so much notice or whatever.
I don't know.
Surely that's in there somewhere. You can't just have an impromptu gathering of the general conference, give everybody like 3 days to get there, and just, I'm sorry, the rest of you chumps can't make it, but we got 50% plus 1, so we're going to do what we want. You can't do that.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's laid out specifically somewhere else, and we're just haven't got to it yet.
Well, and it's not even talking about, okay, so hypothetically that would be like a special called conference, but this is pertaining just to the regularly scheduled general conference, which will be every 4 or 6 or 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. 3, virtual sessions. Where necessary due to international or local conditions that prevent the physical assembly of delegates, the Transitional Leadership Council may, with a 2/3 vote, authorize the conducting of the conference via electronic or other digital means.
Look at us in the modern world.
Yeah.
It's what should have happened in 2020 with COVID in the United Methodist Church, but they said, oh, we can't do it. But no, there should be provision for that.
Yeah. But yeah, that just sounds real hectic. I don't know. I would not want to be in charge of that. Well, I mean, because like a general conference, you can have people just get up and, hey, I want to talk or something, right?
Not if you're following Robert's rules, no.
Well, surely there's some kind of point during the, say, hey, I want to put forward this. They've got to.
Everything has already been put forward for the business. At the very beginning, you accept a consent calendar, which is, here's all the material before us, here's what we're covering. No new introductions except under very extreme circumstances. So everything that precedes, you just work your way through the consent calendar, and then you can propose amendments to stuff. Generally, new petitions are not entertained unless they get so many signatures from people present, which does happen. And it'll detail some of this probably in the next section because it's petitions. But yeah, generally the consent calendar, you just wake your way through that, and then hopefully you get it all done before the terminus.
Okay.
All right, let's go on to paragraph 607, and we'll learn more about it. Petitions to the convening general conference. Any organization, clergy member, or lay member of the GMC may petition the convening general conference in the following manner. Point 1. The petition must be sent to the Transitional Leadership Council or a designated petitions secretary. It shall be in typed or printed or electronic form or other means approved by the TLC and shall follow a format determined by them. Point 2. Each petition must address only one issue if the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline is not affected. If the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline is affected, each petition must address only one paragraph of the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline, except that if two or more paragraphs are so closely related that a change in one affects the others, the petition may call for the amendment of those paragraphs also to make them consistent with one another. Petitions dealing with more than one paragraph in the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline that do not meet these criteria are invalid. Petitions that meet these criteria, composite petitions, shall not be separated into pieces. What I think this is doing is, do you know what pork barrel dealing is?
Yeah, where they just dump well, I guess I don't know if I'd be calling that pork barrel, but essentially just dumping a bunch of stuff into one big law that we
legislative
want to pass.
package,
Yeah, and then just passing the whole thing.
Yeah,
whether it's got like bad stuff in it or good stuff in it, both.
Yeah. So there are laws against it in a legislative session. Interestingly, though, less legislation gets passed whenever no pork is allowed because that's how you often got compromises. Okay, if you vote for my bill, I'll put something in here for you that you like.
Right.
Here it's saying, no. You only deal with one topic, and the only point at which you can amend more than one part of the Book of Discipline is if they're so closely related, they're obviously the same thing.
Right.
So in the Book of Discipline of the United Methodist Church, there were a couple sections dealing with ordination requirements that were so closely related that whenever they dealt with human sexuality, homosexuality, and clergy, those sections could be amended at the exact same time. But unless it's something that clearly connected, you can only do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Which is a good policy,
that makes sense. Good. So not some gigantic, huge change that affects multiple paragraphs, and you vote for it, and you get the part you like, but you get another part that you don't like.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't like adding stuff. So, I mean,
Yeah,
whatever makes it more difficult to approve stuff, I'm in favor.
Right. Yeah. It shouldn't be something that's changing constantly, that you have to every couple of years worry about. Oh, well, the Book of Discipline said this a couple of years ago, but now it says this, and maybe next year it's going to be something completely different. That just sounds chaotic and unnecessary.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah. So,
Point 3, each petition must be signed by the person submitting it, accompanied by appropriate identifications such as address, local church, organization, or annual conference. Any petition submitted by an individual must also be signed by at least 10 other professing or clergy members.
interesting.
I'm going to say that again. Any petition submitted by an individual must also be signed by at least 10 other professing or clergy members. Each petition submitted digitally must identify the individual submitting it, accompanied by identification as above, and must contain a valid electronic mail return address or return fax number by which the submitter can be reached. Electronic signatures will be accepted in accordance with common business practice. I think what it just indicated is if it's just one person submitting it, it's not valid. You got to have at least 10 other people say, we think it's a good, valid idea.
Yeah, you got to have at least 10 other people agree with you before you can submit a petition, which, I mean, I guess that makes sense because if you have individuals just submitting stuff all over the place, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then I like that it says, okay, you've got to identify yourself. We need an address. We need to get a way of getting in contact with you. You can't just be some random person that we don't know about.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
anonymity. I'm cool with that. That sounds great.
Okay. Point 4. Petitions must be received by the TLC or its designee no later than 120 days prior to the opening session of the convening general conference.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
While I go on to the next one, would you look up what that date would be for the GMC?
120 days before the convening general conference.
Yeah. So I think it's September 22nd is when it convenes?
You're asking the wrong person.
All right, so you look that up and then minus 120 days, whatever that is. All right, I'll go on to point 5. Petitions properly submitted shall be printed in advance of the convening General Conference in all the principal languages of the church and made available to the delegates at least 60 days prior to the opening session of the convening General Conference. Where the content of petitions is essentially the same, the petition will be printed once with the first author named and the number of additional copies received printed. Upon publication, all translations of the advanced publication shall be made available as a downloadable file free of charge on the denominational website. Petitions and or resolutions received after the deadline may be printed and distributed to all the delegates upon the approval of each for distribution by the General Conference. So there it's making provision for last-minute legislative stuff being presented and printed at that point. So
September 20th, 2024, it's a Friday, through the 26th. Yeah, 26th. 120 days before that is May 23rd, 2024.
All right, so you got a couple months. If you got 3 months. May is the 5th. We're in the second one.
Yeah.
All right, so there's time. If you've made your way through some of this material with us and you think some stuff needs to change, put it in writing. Put your name and address on it. Get 10 other people to agree with you and put their names on it. And we'll see if we can't do a deal at the General Conference. So this section that we just now covered talked about the timeline. Whoever is responsible for putting out all the legislation, they should collect it by 120 days beforehand, and then they have to get it all published for all of the delegates at least 60 days beforehand.
Okay, so 2 months. That's pretty good.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I think we're on 6 now.
Yeah.
The Secretary of the Convening General Conference shall arrange for electronic access to all petitions, including convening General Conference actions and the resulting impact on the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline throughout the convening General Conference session. This access shall be available until the publication of the new edition of the Book of Doctrines and Discipline. Implementation shall be according to guidelines established by the TLC.
Okay, so they're going to publish they're going to publish all the petitions, which sounds great. I don't know if they do that in the UMC or not.
They do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now it's a document. I'm going through it with the Considering Charlotte crew. It's a document that's like 1,700 pages long.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on page 76 of this. I can't even imagine
Coming through all that.
That's a lot.
Yeah, Lonnie Brooks has like a table. We should try and publish this that shows the intersection points between all of them and what it's an incredible undertaking. But yeah, unless you have people who are willing to do this,
Yeah.
all kinds of legislative stuff can come up last minute that if you don't comb through it with a fine-tooth comb, you might be swallowing something you don't want to swallow.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Hopefully the culture of the Global Methodist Church is going to be hostile to this sort of thing.
Hopefully.
But if it's not, then yeah, you have to have very wonkish people combing through this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's starting to become like the U.S. legislator where they're just publishing stuff 3 days or 24 hours before voting on it.
Right?
Kind of
Yeah.
ridiculousness.
No, yeah, we can't have that.
Yeah, no.
All right, why don't you do paragraph 608?
Okay, 608, legislation effective date. All legislation of the convening General Conference shall become effective January 1st, following the session of the convening General Conference at which it is enacted, unless otherwise specified. So we just had, hypothetically, we just had General Convening Conference after that, so September, the next January 1st is when all of that stuff that's passed takes effect.
Yeah.
It doesn't take effect
Not immediately. No.
unless it's specified at the General Conference. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's all right.
I would have it take place immediately. That makes me, if there's some kind of like period where you can continue violating some standard and not get punished or something, hopefully you could stipulate, no, this is effective immediately.
Yeah. Well, that's what it sounds like. Is you can do that.
Yeah, I was thinking the intent there was, so with paragraph 2553 in the United Methodist Book of Discipline, that was the disaffiliation proposal. And it stipulated Americans can do it 1 year earlier than central conferences, the intention being they would figure out the process, and then central conferences could adapt it. But because they put it off that long, some of that language indicated that they couldn't do it until General Conference 2020. Well, that's technically this next year, after which the provisions of the paragraph don't even apply. So I'm just saying, if you're putting things off a long time, then if it gets interpreted the same way the UMC did it, that can really disenfranchise people. So
yeah, I guess I would need to see why. The only thing I can think of is maybe they haven't figured it out. Maybe they just need time to figure it all out.
There's some procedure that would be very invasive. They want to do it just right.
Yeah, so if you're putting forward something that needs to be changed and you want it changed and not have like a waiting thing, you need to put that in there, apparently. That it needs to take effect right after General Conference.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, let's go on.
Do we want to go on to section 2? That's
regional conferences. We already asked this question of what are regional conferences.
Oh, okay. It goes from section 2 to section 3, right? Real quick. So,
does it? Okay. Yeah. All right. So, no, we're not going to get to section 3. We'll just cover this page.
We're hitting 50 minutes now. So
yeah. We'll just cover 609 and 610 and then be done for today. Okay. You don't think we could do that in 5 minutes?
Well, so I'm thinking section 2, fine.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even see section 3 there.
Right, yeah, it's real quick. So regional conference is annual conference. Obviously, there's a difference between them. So
let's figure out regional conferences and then end
we've already gone over that.
Yeah. Okay. Here's section 2, the regional conferences. Paragraph 609, regional conferences. The Transitional Leadership Council, or the convening general conference, may establish regional conferences for the purpose of coordinating and conducting the mission of the church around the world. The Transitional Leadership Council, or the convening general conference, shall determine the powers, authority, and boundaries of the regional conference. The regional conferences shall be composed of clergy and lay delegates in equal number, elected from the annual conferences within each regional conference. General conference delegates shall also serve as delegates to the regional conference. Where necessary, due to conditions that prevent the physical assembling of delegates, the Transitional Leadership Council or the Regional College of Bishops may, with a 2/3 vote, authorize the conducting of the conference via electronic or other digital means. So I think this is just establishing something like jurisdictional conferences.
That's what it sounds like. It's just it's a step between an annual conference and a general conference, and I don't like that. I think that's completely unnecessary. Stop. Get rid of them. You're making it overly complicated. What's the point of that?
In the United Methodist Church, the jurisdictional conference is where you oversee some shared ministries, which it makes provision for here. Maybe there's a ministry that is really only helpful in the southern part of Africa, so it's composed of 4 African annual conferences that are working collaboratively on this. In the United Methodist Church, the jurisdictional conference is also where bishops are nominated and elected. I don't think that's how we're going to do things in the GMC. But yeah, it says, what was the language? It may establish regional conferences for the purposes of coordinating and conducting the mission of the church around the world. So,
isn't that the purpose of the general conference?
Yeah, but I think they're just imagining there's something that doesn't apply to the whole general church, but it applies to something bigger than an annual conference. Maybe they're just making provision for it. I don't see that we're going to create this system that is going to be maintained in perpetuity. I see more of like an ad hoc. If there's a need, we can establish these bodies in this way that can operate in this way.
I think if there's a need, then you can vote for it at a general conference and then put it in place. Don't put an intermediate, okay, this might happen, let's put it in there. And if it does happen, cool. If it doesn't happen, well, it's still in there. Just make it simple.
Well, no, so general conference is only meeting, it's probably only going to meet every 6 years. Which means if there's a regional need and you have to wait for the general conference, there's a scenario where you could be waiting on 5 years to create the infrastructure necessary to do
Make it shorter than 5 years then.
No. The whole problem with the United Methodist Church was it was too sclerotic. It couldn't be adaptive and respond to immediate needs. You want an organization and that's why we have a TLC, the Transitional Leadership Council. There's nothing like that in the United Methodist Church. The connectional table is kind of close to it, but you need a body that can enact the will of the general conference without calling the general conference together.
You said that the Transitional Leadership Council, it's going to probably continue into the after. So there's already something for that.
So they're making provision here for if there is a regional need that comes about that you don't want to wait 5, 4, 3 years to do, but you want to be able to take care of it now. The TLC can enact the will of the General Conference by creating the structure to make sure it gets proper oversight.
If it's that important, then call a special General Conference.
Yep. Okay. That will be your first legislative effort.
Yeah, it just
if
seems
you want to sign
overly-
on with TJ on that, you can contact him at PlainSpokenPod@gmail.com.
It just seems overly complicated. Like, I'm not for these unnecessarily gigantic, complicated things. Get rid of it. I see the point for an annual conference, general conference, fine. If you're just going to make some kind of in-between because something might come up, then there are provisions that can come up that you can put in place to get rid of that. That makes it unnecessary. If it's that important, just call a special general conference. Or have the Transitional Leadership Council do it, whatever.
Prior to recently, I think there was a provision for a special called General Conference in the United Methodist Church. However, there was only ever one called. And so I'm wondering right now what the odds are that the GMC is going to call special.
Well, do you remember what that was for?
Yeah, it was 2019. It was the human sexuality question.
Okay.
It was the
Important
once
thing.
for all final thing, but it took something that big to justify calling
Right.
a special called conference. So is the GMC going to do, okay, so like in the United Methodist Church, there's, I want to say it's called Lydia Patterson Institute, but that could be another. There's a school right on the other side of the border with Mexico it's in America. It's in Texas that takes Mexican students that come over and they're educated there, and then they go back home and they bless Mexico. If there were a Mexican GMC conference and an American GMC, Texas conference, Mid-Texas or whatever, you would either have to have one assume responsibility for it, or you could form a collaborative for them just to oversee that.
Sure.
That would be ideal. But to call the whole general conference together to take care of that would be a waste of everybody else's time.
But do you need a whole regional conference to start a school? Like, sure, like you can start a church in an annual conference. Shouldn't you be able to be like, okay, hey, we're going to work with this annual conference. There doesn't need to be this. So what I guess my biggest pushback is we're getting into these whole extra conferences, a whole regional conference. The whole idea of getting away from the UMC partly was you've got a gigantic bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And if you're creating these extra regional conferences, at some point, there's going to be bureaucracy that has to go with that. So
Okay.
get rid of it.
Yeah, okay. That's a firm, valid principle. I'm done playing devil's advocate. I think you win. Odds are, if you want a flat structure where it's just plain and clear to everybody who's looking at it, then the regional conferences complicate that if they're utilized.
Yeah, okay. Number 2 in the proposals, get rid of regional conferences.
Okay, very well. Okay, all right.
Or give me a really good excuse.
All right, well, that closes out section 2. Next week, we will begin with the structure of the annual conference, and we'll go from there. So, as always, we appreciate everybody's feedback. You can comment. We like comments, really. It's fun to go down the comments and see everybody's reflections, but if you're more private than that, you can email us at PlainSpokenPod@gmail.com. And then, make sure to share this with your other, they don't even have to be wonk people. They can just be normal people that want to know how things are going to operate at the convening conference this September. It's just good to be an informed populace. So like it, share it, promote what we're doing. And if you want to support what we're doing, you can go to PlainSpoken.locals.com. If you miss that address, we'll show it to you now as we say goodbye.